The gold standard is a monetary system where a country's currency or paper money has a value directly linked to gold. With the gold standard, countries agree to convert paper money into a fixed amount of gold. A country that uses the gold standard sets a fixed price for gold and buys and sells gold at that fixed price. The Economic Consequences of War and Peace, 1919 to 1938, Chapter 6. Markets and Money, the International Economy Before World War II. Germany and Britain were the motors for a worldwide economic system. They had low tariffs, a stable currency exchange rate, they encouraged trade and economic growth, and Germany acted as the economic engine of growth in Europe. World War I broke the circle, disruption and change in the 1920s. Countries went off the gold standard. Trade declined sharply. Britain no longer had the resources to manage world finances, and the U.S. had not replaced it yet. Industrialization spread to many areas of the world with raw materials and processed food. Change in technology. There was oil exchanged for coal and new products. The new industries included electric power, automobiles, gasoline, tourist travel, highway construction, and housing construction. After World War I, the economy was unstable. There was widespread inflation and deflation. Deflation is a decrease in the general price level of goods and services. Inflation indicates a decrease in the purchasing power of a nation's currency. After World War I, there was a short post-economic boom, such as what happened in the U.S. in the 1920s, or the Roaring Twenties. Germany, Austria, Hungary, Poland, and Russia saw runaway inflation. Inflation destroyed the value of currency. 1925 to 1930, Britain, France, Japan all returned to the gold standard. In the 1920s, France and the U.S. managed to achieve economic stability. Capital. In finance and accounting, capital generally refers to financial wealth, especially that used to start and maintain a business. In classical economics, capital is one of the four factors of production. The others are land, labor, and organization. International capital in motion. The health of the international economy depends on the movement of capital among the industrialized nations. Politics and economics shape post-war economic policy. America and Great Britain demanded repayment of war debts. In the Treaty of Versailles, they required Germany to pay a large sum in reparations, close to $3 billion. Germany was to disarm, and Germany had to give up territory. The Dawes Act of 1924 in Germany. It formulated to take the Weimar Germany out of hyperinflation and to return Weimar's economy in some form of stability. Hyperinflation was a monetary inflation occurring at a very high rate. American bankers set up a circular system in which they loaned money to Germany. Germany paid reparations to Western Europe, and they paid their war debts. Depression across the globe. Weakness in the international economic system. The world economy disintegrated between 1929 and 1932. Millions of people were thrown out of work. U.S., the largest economy and major economy, rested on shaky grounds. The domino effect. Depression started in the U.S. Major industries, oil, agriculture, and textiles were in trouble. Stock buying was based on rumor. People seldom paid in full, buying on a margin, which means they had to put down 10% of the value of the stock. On October 29, 1929, the U.S. stock market crashes. The U.S. economy reduced demand for imports, and it refused to lend more money. Raising tariffs in 1930 caused a contraction of world trade. 1930 to 1931, Europe and Latin American banks began to fail. Financial crisis in Central and Eastern Europe spreads to Britain. Britain abandons the gold standard. International economy goes into a downward spiral. In the 1930s, prices for agricultural goods and for products used in industry fell. Agricultural production increases to compensate. Between 1929 and 1930, the value of world trade decreases by 2/3. Depression in the Third World. Depression quickly spreads in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Smallholders include small farmers who own and control the land they farm, and those who do not, in other words, tenant farmers, are hit hard. Wealthy farmers could offset the prices by producing more. Agricultural production holds steady during the Depression. See pages 6.1. See table 6.1, pages 182. Imperial powers pursue policies that favor white elites and home countries. The world is divided into competing blocs. Unemployment, 1932 to 1933. Germany is hit the worst with 44% unemployment. Norwegians are 31%, Austrians 29%. The U.S. has 27% and United Kingdom 22%. Women fare better than men because women seldom worked outside the home. Men lost their self-respect. Politics became more polarized, and there was inequality between the rich and the poor. Interwar economics. National solutions. Regulatory states were in Western Europe, Latin America, and U.S. There, individual companies would make their own decisions about investments, production, and distribution. Japan was a developmental state. Businesses set the rules, but also targeted certain sectors of the economy for state investments. The Soviet Union was a planned communist state. It's a state that owns virtually all the resources and controlled investments. Bureaucrats set prices and production figures. The regulatory states. In the U.S., in 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected. He had a program called the New Deal. It raised confidence in banks, raised farm income, put people back to work. Political opponents defeated some parts of the New Deal. Initiatives did less than anticipated. In Latin America, there were fewer resources than the U.S. They started to import substitutes for high-cost tariffs. Manufacturers replaced imports under the protection of high tariffs. They went off the gold standard and defaulted on foreign debt. In developmental states such as Japan, the Japanese they played a central role in the state's industrialization. The state worked in partnership with giant family-led companies. In the 1930s, exports declined. Unemployment rose sharply. They returned to the gold standard. The government fell, and there was a rise of fascism. There was a campaign to rearm, which created many jobs. Japan also exploited Korea and Manchuria for the raw materials and cheap labor. They produced substitutes for foreign imports. Planned communist states. The Soviet Union. By the end of its civil war in 1917, they allowed growth of the private sector. There was a 5-year plan implemented. Millions joined the workforce. Metals and machinery rose by a factor of 14 times. They achieved a position relative to Germany and the U.S. They had private ownership of arms before, but it shifted to collective farming at a horrible human cost. Joseph Stalin forced industrialization and growth of the authoritarian rule. Stalin pursued enemies ruthlessly. Millions of ordinary people suffered at the hand of the state. Domestic life in hard times. There was a change in industrialization. Birth control was a new thing. Modern medicine and sanitation changed. So people's lives got extended. They had lower death rates and declining birth rates. And that was through one woman in the United States called Margaret Sanger, who was jailed because she would pass out leaflets on birth control, especially for lower-class women who had children year after year after year. Women in power. Women were frequently perceived as inferior and had few rights or opportunities. The family remained an indispensable structure of support. In Europe, women were starting to get the right to own and inherit property. Village life throughout the world. Most of the world's population lived in villages. Villages felt under pressure to change. New ideas from city workers or missionaries. Isolation of rural areas around the world decreased. Migration and urbanization. The 1920s and 1930s were decades of mass migration. After World War I, several million people fled into Central Europe to escape revolution and disorder from the Soviet Union. The Armenians and Greeks were expelled from Turkey. Chinese people fled to escape political turmoil and warfare. Long-distance migrants moved to the cities.